Good morning, folks. So, I heard the whole story about the Salmon end of the Old Man Bender and Cockeyed Kate and the Bloody Bender family story. I'll bet it's been 25 years ago, maybe more. And I haven't been able to find it again anywhere. I make gun holsters and things. And years ago, I did a holster for a guy that was the chief of police at the time, and the police station was located behind the library, where the library is now, which is kind of funny because that is where the jail used to be that Bender was in. But anyhow, they were doing some remodeling, and there was a ball and chain at the bottom of the stairs there, and I asked him about it, and he said, yeah, he said they found that when they were doing some remodeling. I don't know who ended up with that or where it went, but that really should be in the museum. After reading this, I don't know if that's the one Bender was hooked to or not, but it could have been. So, anyhow, like I said, it's been probably 25 years since I saw that story. I've been looking for more info on it. Cindy bought me this book. It's about graves and things in the area, and it has an article about it, but it's kind of the condensed version of the one I'm going to read you here. Anyway, I don't see it in here, but it says that there was a better article in the 1959, I think it was. Yeah, April of 1959 issue of True West magazine. So I searched and searched, and I found that on eBay, and I bought the magazine. And it's got a good article on it. So, here we go here. The letters are small. I gotta get my goggles. Okay, so Leesburg, first off, was a gold strike back in 1866, and I've had videos on that before, and I've showed that off quite a bit. But that was the actual town, and Salmon at that time was the supply camp for Leesburg. But it says here, at the time of which we are writing, the population of Leesburg was numbered in the thousands, Salmon in the scant hundreds. The county sheriff made Leesburg his headquarters and left Salmon to the capable hands of John W. Snook Sr., an old-time peace officer in the best tradition, and not to be confused with his son of the same name, a penologist, I'm not sure what that is, and warden of note in later years. I think he might have been a game warden, if I remember right. But Fred Snook, the guy that puts on the horse sale here, this is one of his relatives, I think an uncle or something. I don't know. I wanted to talk to Fred before I did this, but I will, and if he's got more info, I'll tell you later. But it says, Deputy Sheriff Snook had the reputation of never losing a man. There is a story that he once followed 4 horse thieves into Nevada, returning eventually with the stolen stock. When asked about the thieves, he remarked that he lost them in the quicksand. His family denies the story. If it had any significance, the rustlers were never heard of again. U.S. Highway 93 crosses from the west to the east side of the Salmon River, about 10 miles north of Challis, Idaho, and continues 50 miles to Salmon. Before the road was blasted out of the cliffs and the rock slide, the two towns were joined by a pack trail, which is still visible. We've rode that trail partially on horseback. Joined by a pack trail, all of which was on the west side of the river. It was 60 miles long, and a majority of the miles were steep, rocky, and dangerous. A trip from town to the other from one town to the other involved camping one night at best, and more frequently two. This was the situation when a local Indian known as Mouse reported to Deputy Sheriff Snook that he had found the body of a white man in an eddy in the river near the Nagel Ranch, just below the present Chute Bridge on the Williams Creek Road and about 5 miles upriver from town. Well, here's a picture of those places. This bridge is the Chute Bridge, and it's actually a new one. When we first moved here, it was just a one-lane bridge, and I'm sure that wasn't there in 1884 either. That was the new one before this new one. But I'm sure back then it didn't look like this. But just downstream from here is where the body was found. Somewhere down there on the riverbank was where Old Man Bender, or the guy they thought was Old Man Bender, murdered that guy. Now, a mile or so downstream from the Chute Bridge was supposed to have been the Nagel Ranch. Now, here is Nagel's Machine and Welding Shop. Now, I asked this Nagel if his family had been here for a long time, and he told me no, but there had been another Nagel in this area, and as far as he knew, they were not related. But what are the chances? I mean, Nagel does not seem like a common name, and two of them to be moving to basically the same spot. Not one of those strange psychic things that you move to a family place even though you didn't know you were family. Snook, leading a spare horse and with Mouse for a guide, proceeded to the eddy. They had no trouble finding the body. It was that of a young man, a stranger to Snook, who knew all the permanent residents within 100 miles. He had been murdered. Someone had buried an axe in the top of his head. Snook deduced from the position and nature of the wound that the man had probably been sleeping when the fatal blow was struck. This theory was supported by the absence of footwear. Snook, assisted by Mouse, loaded the body on the spare horse and returned to Salmon. After Snook and Mouse left town, George Carlisle, who had a pack horse mail contract between Salmon and Chalice, arrived in town and began inquiring for the deputy. He believed there had been foul play at the Birch Creek camping place some 12 miles above Salmon. He had noted a number of things which his trained outdoor eyes were suspicious. The body, when Snook arrived with it, vindicated his judgment. He was able to identify that as the young man who had been around Chalice several weeks in company with an older man who spoke with a German accent. He said the young man appeared to have plenty of money. Snook went into action. He quickly discovered that the old man with the German accent had arrived in town on the evening of the third day before and had left the morning the body was found. Cap Williams, who ran a feedlot, advised Snook that the old man had kept his horse in a corral and gave him an exact description of the horse and his owner. He also added that the horse had been shod while in town and that Mrs. Williams had washed some clothing for the old man and had noticed some fresh blood spots. The deputy looked up the blacksmith, who confirmed Cap's description of the gray mare and added that she interfered with her hind feet, and that he had turned the inside calks and weighted the shoes to minimize the difficulty. Snook now knew he had a trail he could follow. Okay, what that means is it's real common for a horse's back feet to hit the front feet. And if they do it bad enough, it'll cause sores on the backs of their hooves. And that can all be corrected with different types of shoeing, which is what he did here. So you would be able to tell that the back shoes were different. Let's see, two of his friends, Dan Richardson and Charlie Price, volunteered to accompany him. The three men left Salmon the following morning while the stars were still shining. The chase was without incident. The three men had their best saddle horses Salmon could supply. They pushed them as hard as they deemed wise, and knowing how long the trail they had embarked on. The first luck came 24 miles out when two Indians told them that their man had left the road and taken the Agency Creek Trail in the direction of Bannock, Montana. I've had videos on both Agency Creek and Bannock. Bannock is a ghost town now, but that was at one time the state capital. The tracks of the gray mare's black pack shoes quickly proved the Indians' information. They had lost no time making sure the old man was not proceeding along the Lemhi Valley Road, which is the back road between Salmon and almost to Chalice. It doesn't go quite that far. Or not Chalice, Ledore. Late in the afternoon, they found where the old man had camped the night before at the foot of the hill on the Montana side of the Continental Divide near the present site of Sacagawea Park. They were 15 miles beyond the point where they put up for the night with a lonely rancher on Horse Prairie. So that Sacagawea Park they're talking about is actually the headwaters of the Missouri. Horse Prairie, I guess you could call it a town. It's really not much of a town, but it's a little kind of settlement between here and Bannock and Dillon. Snook with his two ex-official deputies were again on the wagon road. They did not follow it far before they discovered their quarry had branched off and cut a short trail through the rolling hills toward Bannock. They made good time until near that camp, once the capital of Montana, when it became apparent that he had made a detour around it. Snook sent Richardson and Price into Bannock to make sure the old man had bypassed the town while he followed the tracks of the gray mare. It was 2 hours before they were certain that the fugitive had continued on toward Dillon. Snook was now positive that he could catch his man the next day and would be likely to spend the night in Dillon. He and his two friends spent the night at a ranch a couple of miles out of Dillon. The next morning proved his surmises to 100%. The gray mare and her rider had left town about an hour before. The capture was made several miles east of Dillon at a place known as the Point of Rocks. Richardson and Price galloped past the old man while Snook came up from the rear. They turned and covered him with their pistols while Snook gave his orders. Backed by a rifle, there was no resistance. They disarmed him and tied his feet together under the gray mare and returned via Dillon to Bannock. The captive agreed to return without extradition, but after a day on the road and a night in the Bannock jail, changed his mind. Here's a picture of the Bannock jail. Snook left his two friends to guard the prisoner and returned to Dillon, where he wired the territorial governor in Helena for authority to remove the old man from the territory of Montana. 2 days after the papers arrived, duly signed and sealed, he returned to Bannock. The old man was becoming definitely uncooperative. He claimed that he was too sick to ride a horse. Snook secured a team and buggy and reined himself in by returning by the much longer freight road. The prisoner made other objections and refused to get in the buggy. Snook, who was certain that he was only trying to set a stage for a possible escape, put him on a horse again, tied his feet, and started for Salmon. It was the 3rd of July. Bannock, with a long reputation for impulsive justice, was getting liquored up for a celebration. Price and Richardson had told the story of the murderer on the Chalice Trail. Snook had a suspicion that he wanted to deliver his prisoner in Salmon. With his neck intact, it was imperative to get started without delay. The vigilantes strung up a lot of people, including my I think it'd be great Uncle Frank. He was part of the plumber gang, which is a whole nother story. The return trip of approximately 90 miles was made in 2 days, backtracking themselves on the Lewis and Clark Trail. which is over Agency Creek. The only event that broke the monotony occurred on Gertson Creek, 8 miles out of Salmon. It was long after dark. The gray mare stumbled over a sagebrush under which a grouse had bedded down for the night. The large bird came up in the horse's face like an explosion. Tired as the mare must have been, it was just too much for her to take. She started to buck. Remember, the guy's feet are tight under his horse. The 3 lawmen had a fast minute or two trying to keep the old man with his feet tied upright, at the same time pacify the outraged mare. This is the old Lemhi Valley Road and Gertson Creek Road. Back then, of course, it's still dirt, but back then, of course, it would have been a wagon road. And then up Gertson Creek, back then there'd been quite a few horse trails that would go over the top of some of these saddles and into Montana. Montana is just right over the top of that ridge right there. Salmon wound up its 4th of July with a dance. It was well after midnight when Snook, his 2 friends, and the prisoner arrived. Their advent broke up the social event instantly. There was no lynching talk, possibly because the murdered man had been a stranger and because no one in his right mind would consider the possibility of taking a prisoner away from Snook. No one had got around to building a jail in Salmon when these events took place. The back end of a frame store building on the corner of St. Charles and Main, the present site of the smokehouse, served as a sheriff's office. A basement had been excavated under this annex, and a heavy iron bar dropped through the office floor and driven deeply into the underlying gumbo and river wash. A couple of iron rings with 6 or 8 feet of chain attached were loosely welded around the bar. Prisoners were shackled to the chains. So when we moved here, the smokehouse was a little restaurant, and Smokehouse Mary, she was not a very nice gal, and I don't know, looking back on it, people really kind of picked on her too, because that was one of the only places that was still open after the bars closed, and a lot of drunks would go in there, and she had a short temper. The service was terrible, the food was worse, but it was open, so we got thrown out of there several times. But anyhow, this is a good spot to stop. Hopefully you'll stick around for part 3, because this is where it really gets kind of neat. What they did to this poor guy after he was dead, it kind of fitting if he really was the murderer. If he wasn't, well, they didn't treat him too nicely. So anyhow, see you folks tomorrow, and thanks for watching. Bye. Hope you'll stick around. See you tomorrow.